Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with CreativeMind. I'm Deborah Burnt-Maldonado.
I'm Dr. Rob.
And we are here to bring you another episode on the unconscious, psychology, neuroscience, and Eastern philosophy. And today we are going to talk about the archetype called the Trickster. And we're going to have great reverence for this topic because when we talk about the Trickster, it seems to bring up trickster qualities in everyone. So, but it's a very powerful concept by Jung. Yeah. And we're excited to dive into it and show you how you can apply this in a coaching model. And before we do, I do want to recommend that you subscribe to our channel. If you can, do us a favor on Spotify, iTunes, so you don't miss an episode. Mm-hmm. So all the right. Trickster, let's start with just kind of what is the archetype and then kind of some grounding descriptions of these concepts that we're about to share.
So it is a big topic. So we wanted to focus on the individuation process and in particular the way we coach individuation in our Jungian coaching model. So these archetypes exist in the psyche, and they're universal, meaning everyone has them. We're born into them, with them. They essentially run our psyche.
Kind of like human nature, would you say? The way to describe it?
Yeah, Jung often talks about the nature of the psyche as if saying we see external nature out there. Our mind is natural as well. There's a nature to it. And what is that nature, those rhythms, those energies that keep it going? That's what he called archetypes. So these archetypes essentially run the nature of the psyche.
So this concept of a blank slate when you're born is really not a Jungian concept. Jung believed that we're born with a 2 million year man inside of us. That all the history and collective history of mankind is in our DNA and our experiences that we're bringing into the world and our experiences in life. So our personal history is just a tiny blip of what really gives us our reality in life. And I do want to say individuation, Jung's work is so many volumes and there's so many ways to work with Jung. And we in our depth coaching model focus on individuation, which is self-actualization, like in a Maslow hierarchy of needs level where you're transcending the ego, the human like basic needs, and you're going to transcendental needs. And that's really the journey that we take our clients on and our coaches take our clients on. So the Trickster is actually really important in this process because if you don't have the Trickster, things are going to change.
Yeah, and one characteristic of archetypes is that they contain the totality of the psychic dynamics, which means they're both light and dark. So, we can say negative and positive, but we try to drop those labels because they kind of put us in a very limited perspective. And when we approach the collective unconscious is where these archetypes reside, we want to be more open and flexible. So light and darkness, right? We see it in mythology that the trickster can be a teacher, a guide, like in Star Wars, where Yoda is the fool in the beginning. He's playing the fool, playing the trickster. He's clowning around, making tricks.
But teaching him higher wisdom.
Then he reveals himself as a teacher of higher wisdom and, accepts Luke Skywalker, your friend, as
Mark Hamill,
as a student. So it has all these facets within the archetype, and that's one of the characteristics of archetypes in general. So the trickster is no exception. He contains both the light teacher aspects as well as the darker, aggressive and trickster-like qualities, right, that mess you up or trip you up.
What I find it interesting too, the duality that you talk about. And if you study Jung's work, it's all about the persona, the shadow, the personal, the collective, these, the good and the bad, the duality. And, in a lot of our work we do, we talk about the Vedanta, which is non-dual philosophy in Eastern philosophy. And it really goes well together with Jung's theory, because his theory is we don't want to be in opposites. We want to integrate. We want to look at both sides of the coin, not just always try to be good. Like he said, we can't be enlightened by just imagining figures of light. We have to look at the darkness. And the trickster really invites us to, on both sides, to play around with the duality and almost disrupt the status quo so that we can have enlightenment.
So right off the bat, the trickster archetype can be a catalyst for transformation, which is individuation. We need that catalyst in order to transform from ego identification, or what Jung called the persona, to the self. Without that catalyst, we can't undergo that transformation. And the trickster plays a vital role throughout the whole process. In the beginning, of course, we can think of the shadow. The shadow element is a trickster element because it represents the rejected, kind of cast off aspects of our personality that come back to
show us as people that trigger us, right?
To trip us up. Yeah, it shows up as kind of accidents or
annoying people,
triggers, emotional triggers.
That person who stole your work at your project at work, or someone, like I see this in a friend of mine was a coach, and she's like, someone stole her book, basically sold it online with the same cover. And so it's like, why is that happening? Why do these seemingly evil or dark or mean, even cruel things happen? And it's really, it's not that it's not good or bad, like we want to whitewash it, but we want to look at it as, how can this help me? How can this situation, what is this situation reflecting in me? And I often find it shows up when we're really attached to one, or very rigid. When we get too rigid, like we're trying to be too good or too smart or too controlling, the trickster will no doubt show up to disrupt that hyper control so that we can relax and bring us back into balance again. Jung always thought about the light and the dark, the control and creativity, all a part of the balance of life, masculine, feminine. It's not one-sided. And the trickster is that kind of part of us that disrupts so that we can realign. And so we don't want to fear it. We want to look at it as a gift. And at first, it doesn't feel that way. But some of the qualities are playfulness, inventive energy. It helps us break through creative blocks and limitations. I mean, it's such a powerful, if we understand it really well, we won't be afraid of it. And I see so many people get so upset when an upheaval happens in their life, and they immediately want to get back into control. I want to control things again. And the trickster energy invites us to be in a little chaos. And it's very hard for us as human beings, right? To be there.
Yeah, that's one of the dualities that Jung talks about. Because if you think about the ego, it thrives on predictability, on certainty, on comfort. In other words, it's our comfort zone. It's where we want to stay because we can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. And so we have that sense of control. And of course, we use reason, logic, the natural flow of time, the way it appears to us as going from past to present to future. The unconscious mind, especially in the shadow, is completely the opposite. It's irrational, it's emotional, it's intuitive, and it's chaotic. In other words, it brings chaos, the uncertainty principle, into play in our lives, and it disrupts the natural flow. The ego functions, right, which wants predictability. But of course, without those breaks, without those seemingly haphazard accidents, there can be no creativity, no evolution, because if everything is predictable, there is no creativity. It's already set.
It's like the status quo, right?
Yes.
The status quo. So the first benefit of the Trickster is it's a catalyst for transformation.
Yes, and the way we use then the coaching is to help the clients embrace this element that is a natural part of the psyche of life, of everything that we experience, instead of seeing it as an obstruction, a trigger, an accident, something
Bad
to be
luck.
Yeah,
Right.
something to be rejected. Let's embrace it. Let's use it. What is this teaching us, and how can we move forward and use this creative flow and move into a new creative space?
And so many times in my life, I've had Trickster show up when I was laid off from my job, and you're thrown into this uncertainty of, I don't have that paycheck. But if you use it as a catalyst for creativity and innovation, and be in the chaos for a little bit, and maybe even, like, I know a lot of people that do our work, come to our coach training, we're thinking about changing their life. They're very kind of stuck in their careers that make logical sense. They maybe have advanced degrees in it. They've studied their whole life. They're successful at it, but nothing, they're not fulfilled. And so the Trickster comes in and says, well, you know what? Like for me, I waited so long I was like, I want to do something else. And then finally, it's like the Trickster's like, I waited long enough. We're just going to lay you off, and you're going to have to go and figure this out. And that's kind of the energy. If you think about it, it's a disruptor, but then it frees up something else. Like when you take out logic and organization, you're forced to be creative. So that's the really powerful part of it. And as a coach, if you understand this energy, you don't freak out when your clients have an upset in their life, and you don't get all attached to them being back to, like, hanging on to, like, they're floaty in the water again. Let them be comfortable with the chaos, and for you being a wise coach, to be grounded and witness it and help tell them don't be afraid. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, certainly reframing the situation from this is a problem or something bad that happened to me. It's an opportunity, right? We always approach things as opportunities for growth, for creativity.
Well, one of the things that I could talk about one time when we first started working together, remember we did that event and we had a booth, and we had our little name bowl with everyone put their business cards in. And the next day I came down and all the cards were gone. And I asked my assistant, Marie, did you take the cards? And she said no. And she had just left it out. And I didn't think it was that important. I didn't think anyone would. So they took all of our leads. And the coach at the time I was working with was like, oh, that's interesting. So it's like a trickster energy. But what did I learn from it? I learned that I didn't really believe that there were real clients in there, that I didn't protect it, right? And so it was like interesting, the assumption I made. And so these things show up to kind of reveal unconscious patterns or unconscious assumptions we're making about a situation. And when it just kind of makes us think differently.
Yes, and because that is the aim of individuation, to make the unconscious conscious. So this approach essentially helps us see what is unconsciously running our life. So the second phase or work of the Trickster is the creative problem solver. Instead of the typical, let's solve problems head on and let's tackle them with reason and logic, the Trickster always invites us to think outside the box. Right, to work outside of the system, to break a few rules, or at least bend them a little bit. So we learn the rules and we practice that as much as we can, of course. But in creating something new and brainstorming and figuring out problems in a completely new way, this is where disruptors come in, right? They see the problem, the typical problem, in a completely fresh and new way. That's the Trickster element.
Kind of like Uber was a Trickster, looking at a taxi and getting a taxi on an app. So many, Amazon kind of was a Trickster. Like, you can buy everything here online in one store. And so these big companies, they start out small and they break the conventions of the way we do things.
Yeah.
Even some of the innovations that have happened have come through like a problem in a business that we have to solve. How many times have we made plans, Rob? And we had a plan and we were like, okay. And we were kind of like, this is what we're going to do. And this is the result we expect. And we didn't get the result. It forced us to look at that trickster energy, like what's happening. And it forced us to be more creative. And then what ended up happening is even a better idea came up. So we don't want to look at, like, I think maybe in this, instead of thinking of things as failures and successes, the trickster is kind of like creative problem solver. It's like there are always going to be problems and we're always trying to resolve them. But if we look at them as a failure, it limits it and then it takes all the power and magic away from it.
Yeah. When we're coaching executives, business owners, co-founders, whatever they are, we always advise them to drop the duality of good and bad, right and wrong, because that opens up that connection between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And it's a powerful way of inviting creativity into the mix.
So what we're really saying, and correct me, because I just came to me, is that are that creative, the idea that you that's going to get you to the next level is not conscious yet. That's right. You have to there has to be something to kind of disrupt the pattern so that you can access those new ideas. Yeah. How many companies have been around for 20, 50 years and they're doing things the same old way, the same old bureaucracy, and the trickster comes in to disrupt that bureaucracy, and a competitor comes in that completely takes away their business. I mean, MySpace was taken over by Facebook. Just like all these innovations in AI is a disruptor. Do you think AI is kind of a trickster as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so the third one is really working from a shadow perspective.
Yeah, shadow integration, which means, again, embracing those aspects that we throw away. What the builder considers useless, we say, well, why is it useless? So let's look at it in a fresh new way and brainstorm of how can we integrate these elements into our psyche. Again, Jung's idea is very simple. The unconscious will drive your decisions, and you'll think that's just the way things are. There's nothing else beyond what I'm seeing, what I'm perceiving, what I'm thinking, and my logical perspective on life. And he's saying that's wrong. That's a very limited perspective on your life. The unconscious contains the wisdom that you've accumulated through your natural experience of living.
Classic collective experiences.
That's right. And it taps into the collective unconscious. It has this creative power in itself. If you're simply using your ego mind, you're limiting yourself to predictability, to logic. And of course, we need that. We want to use reason and logic.
You don't want to be in chaos all the time.
But we don't want to lock ourselves into it, because then it's out of balance and it's not using that creative power that the trickster, the unconscious, brings into the picture. And the shadow in individuation is the beginning of that. Once somebody integrates their shadow, we see them transform completely. They no longer feel hopeless and helpless. They understand that they hold the key to their evolution.
Well, also and in addition to that, they do because they have a direct experience of the mirror that their external life is reflecting. Because when you see the shadow, you're seeing your unconscious out in the world that you're not able to accept about yourself, and able to integrate, like, oh, this is a part of me that I'm seeing. This is my creation, not in a like you in the little you, but in this like whole of who you are. And then the more you have access to these deeper forces, not only personal but collective, you're able to do amazing things, really incredible, unlimited things, because you're not limited by just what you learned in this little blip of a couple decades of your life that you acquired knowledge you acquired on a conscious level. You're able to tap into wisdom that's millions of years old.
Yes. So
And so Jung called the shadow, I mean, the trickster, the collective shadow.
yeah, that's a bigger aspect of it. There's a beautiful book for those of you interested in further reading. It's called The Undiscovered Self, where he talks about the collective aspects of the trickster as playing out in politics, in culture, in society in a big way. And it's very powerful. But in individuation, we, of course, focus on our individual journey, right? Our hero's journey of that inner journey that we take and looking at our own life and our own history. And it plays into humor, rebellion, and mischief. In other words, we
It's like
want
breaking the rules, right?
yeah, we want to incorporate those things, but in a balanced, creative way. Often, shadow work is often presented as the very dark things in our personality. Of course, there's always some of that, but there's a lot more to it, and this is where the study of Jung's work comes in. That we read deeper into his work and understand what he was talking about. He wasn't just talking about the dark aspects of our personality, but our creativity, our connection with the irrational and us, the emotional, which gives us our passion, our drive, that creative spark that we need.
And sometimes when we think of dark, it's not dark in a negative way. It's more that there's no light of our consciousness in it. It's like a closet that has a light out and we can't see the contents. And what we're bringing is the light of our conscious mind into the shadow and understanding all the parts of ourself that we haven't acknowledged and integrating them, making them a part of our life. And it's not about like persona swapping where now I'm going to be this chaotic person because I was hyperly controlled. But how do I bring both into balance? How do I invite a little chaos in and a little non-structure, right? A little playfulness. I see this in anytime someone has a goal, whether they want to find love or they want to make money in a business, they want to launch a business, they get really like so attached. And they even in their personal development work, they get so like, I got to fix this. Like, I got to fix what's inside and I got to manifest right, or I have to think positive and I have to really do everything right so I can get this thing. And that's really what the trickster does. It bringing that energy in, it loosens up that attachment. You start to bring humor and kind of playfulness into the goals that you have. And that really is a beautiful integration of the trickster energy. Like, you're going to be like a little disruptive. You're going to do something unprecedented in your life and surprise yourself.
Yeah. And because the trickster is part of the collective unconscious, in other words, it's a deeper archetype, in the individuation process, it requires the individual to really understand his emotional or her emotional life before they can get to this stage of creative power, which the trickster brings. But the trickster does integrate creativity into the individual's lives by allowing them to authentically tap into that creative power and then be able to express it and not be ashamed, not be worried about what other people are going to think, not be limited by their past conditioning. The archetype gives you the power to create at a whole new level.
So we can use the trickster as a very constructive, creative, archetypal energy, right? But there are people that haven't done their shadow work that are tricksters, and they're more destructive, and they kind of cause problems to create problems. And the Joker was a great example of that. Batman was talking to Alfred, and he's like, why would he do all this? Like, what's his purpose? And he said, some people just want to burn the world down. And so that's kind of almost like the dark side of the trickster, is that it can be very destructive if someone is using that energy in not consciously, like in an undeveloped way. It can become very destructive.
Well, here's how Jung formulates it. When you ignore your inner journey, your inner process, in other words, you're highly externalized, you're projecting everything externally, and you're saying, I have nothing to do with this, I'm just kind of showing up for life and doing my part.
Or you have an inflated persona, kind of? Like
Not so much that. It's simply that you're not taking responsibility. You're saying fate is produced or given to me by the external circumstances. You're not saying I'm causing my life.
I'm responsible for
I'm
my
responsible. When you're doing that, what you're doing, you're inviting then those powerful archetypal elements to play out unconsciously, meaning you're not participating in that creative process. And so it's going to play out according to what the assumptions you made early on in your life.
So if you were a victim, it would be like you would destroy things out of anger and be kind of, we've all worked with someone like that, like the one person in the office that was like the crazy maker, that came in and disrupted a lot because it was almost like an inflated shadow, would you say?
Well, the shadow, we all have it, and it plays out in everyone's life. The choice is this: are you going to try to participate in that process, or are you going to try to ignore it and prop up your persona and shine up more, create more defenses in your ego to protect yourself against the world?
And so how does that play out for an individual? Is it destructive?
It can be, exactly. It can play out as illness, as accidents, as divorces, as traumas, as job
financial
losses,
loss,
job tragedy, all these things that we all experience at some point in our lives. The key is to
it's
find
almost like
the
that
key
unfiltered
within you through shadow integration. It doesn't mean you won't have any problems, but you'll be able to see the problems in a more realistic way and to approach them in a more creative way to solve them. In other words, like we were talking, to use those experiences for your own creative growth.
So we always talk about archetypes. They act autonomously. So what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is that if we're not participating actively in it, the trickster basically takes over in our life. And so it could be, just unreal, like it's like a wild dog just letting you loose in your house, just like kind of where you don't have that control.
Yeah, because remember, this is
out of control too, right?
Yeah, this is the irrational. This is the unpredictable. What do we call accidents? They're unpredictable, right? They appear to just happen. There's a pattern to them. There's a kind of an emotional logic to them, but we don't see it. It's unconscious, in other words.
So would the trickster magnify what we're resisting unconsciously? Like it's almost like a magnifier of that. So if we're holding in ourselves like a fear of like everyone liking us, it would be this kind of public shame that we would have to face, or like something like that. Or if we're holding in fear of like being poor, or not making enough money and not being successful, it will play out. If you're not making it conscious, the trickster could be more like financial loss and stuff like that. Like almost like whatever you fear, the trickster magnifies, not in a cruel way. It feels like cruel, but it's really for you to see what you're like, almost like magnifying your fear so you can deal with it.
That's the intention.
Yeah.
Because nature is always wanting to grow, right? To simply transcend itself. It doesn't really involve evil the way we think of it in good and bad duality, but it will play out that way for us. It will appear as if life is against us, or we're fated to fail, or all those things. They're coming from within the unconscious mind.
And then if you're not conscious, you end up fighting the world. You're always constantly fighting the world and feeling like a victim to the world because it's magnifying that belief or that assumption. And then it becomes just bigger and bigger until you face it. Until you finally face it. Some people never do, but some people, it's the catalyst, right? It comes right back to the beginning. It becomes that time. I remember I talk about in one of my books, My Homeless, Manless, and Jobless time. I was laid off from my job. I had broke my engagement to someone a long time ago, very long time ago. And I had to move out of my house. And I was like, basically had to find some place to live. I had to find a new job. And I was out of a relationship, like everything that everyone would think gives you security. And it was because I was hanging on to the wrong things, like a corporate job that I wasn't happy with, a relationship that wasn't great, and a place that I really didn't love anyway. It's just like kind of rational. And it was like, it felt like cruel in a way, but the chaos, I remember everyone said, Debbie, you were so calm in that place. Because I said, I knew, like, God said to me, we don't like what you're doing here. We're just going to like start over. And so sometimes it comes in the form of that, right? That almost like a dark night of the soul. Can the trickster come in?
Yeah, like the wrecking ball.
Yeah, it's like that when you get too attached or you're on the wrong track and you're not seeing it and you're just like going down that road and you're refusing to get out of your comfort zone. It's like the trickster energy comes in as an invitation to step into something more. And at first it's a shock to you, and but then it's a gift.
It's a gift, and it's a choice that we always have, but we have to be conscious of this again. And always the key, and Jung emphasizes this over and over, it's being aware, being open to examining these things that happen to us in our lives, and instead of seeing them as terrible things, always approach them as opportunities for growth, right? That those chaotic elements that help us transcend the old patterns.
And so we work with them with the emotion that it triggers with us in it. We work with that active imagination where we interact with the symbols that are showing up that are trickster energy. And then most importantly, it shows up in dreams. It gives us a window into the unconscious that we're not normally have access to. And so there are many, many ways. And then obviously Jung in-depth coaching is a way to really have that like live one-on-one with someone to help you understand why these things are showing up and how you can use them to create from, instead of feeling like the world is against you or the outer world is, never not cooperating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those are like many of you look back and see a setback in your life has always turned into something greater. And so if you can approach life like that, you're not afraid of making mistakes. You're not afraid of taking risks because you know that when you do that, you're inviting in this creative energy and that you will be taken care of and there's nowhere to fall.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, this was a really timely episode with the trickster. We had a couple requests for this. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week on another episode. We will probably talk about another archetype that you can use in coaching, and we hope you join us next week. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check the resources below in the show notes for more free downloads and information from our work.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.